We're going to talk about Ange Postecoglou, if it's time to go. I mean, a lot of fans were reserving their judgment a lot until the end of the cup competitions, and I felt like there was a bit of a turning point in the away end, especially at Villa Park on Sunday night. I mean, where are you at with it, Sean? Because I cast my mind back to the first leg of the Liverpool game. I was very anti-Ange Postecoglou at that point. You were laying into me before that game and then laid into me after that game, saying, you got to back Ange, you got to back Ange, you got to back Ange. So where are you at with it now?
Well, the reason I don't think I'm laying into anyone, nor will I saying you have to back. I think my stance has been fairly consistent. I think I've been frustrated. Obviously, I've been empathetic with the plight of the injuries. I think that it's would be remarkably unfair to say that he has had a fair crack with regards to the injuries. Now, putting aside of like how did the injuries happen, why, what's responsible for them, I've also said that. I think it would be unfair to relieve him of his duties because of the league performance and the league position when you're still in all three cups. And if you get to a semi-final of a cup and you're in the fourth round of another and you're in the last 16 of the third, then I think that given the fact you weren't going to win the league anyway, that, it's not a failure, right? So I don't think you can, when you bake all that stuff together, I think you had to kind of give it at least until 2 of the 3 cups were done, and or see a couple of other things that might represent the notion that he's lost the dressing room. And as I said a few times this week, I think that losing the dressing room doesn't have to be visible in demonstrations like fights on the pitch or arguments or throwing down the shirt or tantrums, that sort of stuff. It can be just as simple as, players that look confused. And I do think that at times over the last 2 games, there's been several examples where the left hand doesn't look like the right, like he knows what the right hand is doing. I think that, just to go back to say, when Matisse Tell came on the pitch and pressed in the first 30 seconds and then turned around and berated Decky and Sonny, and they said, like, no, we're not pressing. Was that because they're exhausted? Then if so, why were they on the pitch against Villa? Why did you take off Mikey Moore, who has fresher legs? If it's because of an instruction that they weren't supposed to be pressing, they were supposed to be sitting in, tucking in and doing more of a low block kind of vibe against Liverpool, then why was Matisse Tell coming on the pitch with a different energy and a different kind of instruction? I don't know where the truth lies, but I'd imagine it's somewhere within the vibe of that there's a different set of instructions that aren't being communicated. I think when you look at the midfield 3 in both of the games, some of the snapshots that I've seen of like 4 or 5 men chasing one player back after he's broken through, the triangles that we saw with, just seemingly like no structure to the system at all, it just comes across to me like, at this point in time, there's a combination of exhaustion for sure, but there's also demonstrations of like just the players are all over the pitch with regards the setup, and there's no solid foundation there that we've seen. Even if you weren't a fan of Plan A, at least Plan A had its formation, right, and its structure, and it was visible, tangible, and consistent. Now, I feel like, again, not to hark on, but I feel like if you were to believe Ange when he said the injuries are not my fault, not the training's fault, we don't even train anymore because we're playing twice a week and there's a recovery process and the medical time and yada, 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 then if that's the case, then why are we suddenly flipping to a low block against Liverpool and then something that was between the 2 against Aston Villa after the first 30 minutes that were just abject? And I just feel like, there's so many question marks that I have now around what is happening in the communication. And I feel like Ange is the master of putting the right words in the right order to make everyone feel empathetic to his plight. But sometimes he comes across to me like he's talking out of both sides of his mouth. And I think that he's a master salesman with the ability to say these things that make everyone feel a little bit sorry. And I get it, right? There's absolute merit to a lot of the things that he says. But I also think that there's a lot of demonstrations that the team no longer really understand what it is that's expected or wanted out of what options we do have. And the notion that we don't have any options and that we have what we have and that's it, I just don't subscribe to it. You could have played Ben Davies, right? He's nowhere near has as many minutes in his legs as Pedro Porro, but Pedro Porro plays. You could have played Jed Spence in the right back role and put Pedro Porro forward in the second half against Liverpool, which makes more sense to me. Not that I think Jed Spence had a bad game, but like I think that just there's loads of things that don't make sense. This notion that the back 3 that we tried against Everton and we shelved it after 45 minutes as a failed experiment. Why? It's like it's a commonly used theme away from home, not usually employed against Everton, who's probably the only team in the Premier League that you wouldn't use it. But either way, just because it didn't work for 45 minutes doesn't mean that you put it away forever. And it came across like he said, well, we tried it, it didn't work. So therefore, can I now get back to my usual business, please, and leave me alone? I just think that all of those things culminate to me in a world where he's had enough rope. I think that the 2 cup exits now, I don't really want to wait another month until the last cup. And so I'm ready for change, even though it's a shame. It's a real shame. I wanted it to work. But the conundrum for me now is like, where do you go from here, and what's the best option regarding what's next? And I think it's a very difficult square to circle given where we are in the league, who you're probably going to go after, the dry market, and all those things. And I'm happy to chew that stuff over. But ultimately, do I think that Ange should be here right now? Probably not, if I'm honest, no.
I want to get back to some of the points that you raised there, but I just want to bring in Brian and get his initial thoughts on Ange. I mean, I kind of think I know what he's going to say here in terms of what his barefaced opinion is, but do you think it is time to go right now? Is he past? Is he on borrowed time right now?
I'm going to start this by pretty much saying exactly what Sean said, which you don't hear a lot with me and Sean, but basically exactly what Sean said. But I'll add a few more things to it. I've said here along and on here mainly that I've never turned on a manager before, never. But after that Arsenal game at the Emirates, just with the lack of fight for a North London derby, you shouldn't need pep talks. You shouldn't need anything to be up for that game and put in 90 minutes worth of fight, and there just wasn't. Then I heard after that Ipswich had lost less games than us. And when you think that they hadn't had their first win until they beat us in mid-November, I was like, what the hell? Then you add the worst points for game record. And all these stats are just not helping. And basically everything Sean said about the tactics, formation, not being able to rotate players when he says it, when he has been able to. They may not have been at the level, but they certainly were positionally players there to help Ange out and rest players, rotate, try different form. Like Sean said with trying the back three just once for one half. Well, he's tried his attacking format with sometimes the wrong set of players over and over and over and over again, and it's failed and it's failed and it's failed during this injury crisis. Yeah, he only gives 45 minutes to a back three. And when we did have the great players for the back three, as in your Van der Vens, your Mickey, your Romeros, and he could have tried it, he didn't. I think he's just... I really wanted this to work, and I really loved him. And thought, you know what, I want to see this. I want to see a project through. I was saying the whole time, I want to see a project through, so at least we can turn around and say, do you know what, Spurs tried something different. They did try a project. They did try and see it through. But it's a results-based business, and he's not getting them. So for me, it's got to be a new approach, because it's just not working.
I wanna ask Sim this question, because Sean brings up the point about, you know, players potentially looking confused, mixed messaging coming in there, and you know, it's something that Ange Postecoglou alluded to, didn't he, after the Liverpool game, about mixed messaging, about the team were dropping back. He wanted them to go and attack. He thought maybe he focused a bit too much on defensive solidity prior to the game, and that maybe brought across a bit of mixed messaging towards a team, which, in my opinion, in a game like that, of that magnitude, is a bit unforgivable in a semi-final. Like, how is mixed messaging going into a semi-final? You should know your exact game plan, the players should know the exact game plan, and you should go and try and implement that. I mean, why is that happening?
I think in that specific game, we know that we were going into the game with a 1-0 lead, going into the cauldron that is Anfield with the situation that we're in. So I'm sure that Ange wanted us to have a bit of that kind of defensive nous that maybe we showed against Brentford, not obviously go there and go completely gung-ho, but also not be a bit braver than we were on the ball, not just completely sit deep and wait to concede, essentially, which we did when we went to Anfield, how we approached the game, I think. And I think obviously, first of all, there's a few different things going into this situation. It's not just the injury crisis, which is obviously a massive factor. You've also got players coming in like Gray, Bergvall, who are very, even Tell, teenagers, very young, quite early on in their careers. They still got to learn, the tactical side of the game, all these different things. You got Danso making his debut. You got Kinski, who's a 21-year-old goalkeeper who's, very early on at this kind of level. And you've got a lot of senior players who are, quite frankly, knackered, and they're quite frankly been playing a hell of a lot of football over the last 2 months. So all these things put into one cauldron, one melting pot, has led to the issues that we face. Now, in terms of the mixed messaging, I think it was right for Ange to tell the players, you need to make sure we're not making it easy for Liverpool to make chances like we did in the first leg, making sure that they're finding it difficult to create chances and finding it difficult to open us up. But also, he should have maybe focused on more that we have to be braver off the ball, and we do that by being brave on and off the ball like we were in the first leg as well. We did create chances in that first leg, and we could have won that first leg by more than a goal, in all honesty, and we probably look back and regretting that we missed those chances in that first leg to not take a bigger lead to Anfield. So I think he said the majority of the messaging was about how we defend, but I don't think he expected, because he knows what team he wants us to be. He knows that everyone knows that we are a team that, any given situation, we are going to try and score goals during the game. We are going to try and win, but we didn't do that at all against Liverpool, and we completely neglected that side of the game. Now, whether I think Ange has to take responsibility for that, and I think he did after the game. He said maybe I focused too much on that, and maybe I didn't drum into the players that we still need to be brave and we still need to try and score goals and go there and at least take the game a bit to them. But I also think if we would have gone there and gone gung-ho and started like we did against Villa, where we were completely going at them and conceded, he also would have got pillared, and that also is not an unlikely situation given Liverpool. I also think you're playing the best team in Europe. You're playing a team as well with one injury, a team in unbelievable momentum, and they've pretty much got their first choice 11 out there. Whatever we did in the situation that we were in, it's unlikely we would have gotten the result. It would have taken a miracle to go out there into the final.
Result, that's the thing that hurts the most, is it though?
No, it's not. It's the way we went about it, and it was a shit show from start to finish. I'm not going to deny that. We didn't have a shot on target, and that was the most disappointing. That was the most... Look, you can be angry about that, and you're right, and you're within your rights to be angry about that. But you also got to realise who we were facing. They were not a bad team. This is the best team in Europe right now. I think most people would agree. I think this is an incredible team. Better teams than us have also. Add into the fact you got Anfield, right? Better teams than us. I've seen the Centurions go there in a Champions League semi-final. This is a team that got 100 points in the Premier League. They went to Anfield and shit the bed in the Champions League semi-final, losing 3-0. This is a ground that can get the best of players out of funk. And we're not the best at all. We're far from it. We are a team which is tired. We're a mishmash, and we're absolutely on our feet. And we're a young team. We're a team that's also still growing. We're not this well-oiled machine yet. I think we showed signs at the beginning of the season that we can be a good team, but we're still growing. We were still yet to get to that point yet, and obviously this injury crisis hit before we got to that point. So I think for me, as much as I was angry and annoyed about Anfield and Sunday as well, I thought the performance was, again, all over the place. But I just think it's a myriad of problems. It's not just the injury crisis. It's not the players that is missing. It's not even just the players that are there as well. It's the fact that the players that are there are young. They're new to the team. They're inexperienced. They're not gelled. The back line is keep chopping and changing seemingly every week. There's no kind of consistency. There's players in the front line who are having to play every week because we've got very, very few options. And there's even players that people are calling for. Mikey Moore comes in. He's a 17-year-old kid. We're relying on a 17-year-old to come in and try and get results in these big games. I mean, I just feel for him. I really do feel for him in this current situation with where we're at. And I understand that you look at the overall results and you look at the big picture, and you can say the results are the results, and regardless of the situation, he should be getting better results, and we shouldn't be there's no situation we should ever be 14th and all this kind of stuff. And I hear that, and I want to believe that, but sometimes that's the reality of the situation. I think I'm not sitting here saying I think he deserves another season or anything like that. I'm just saying we've gone through this whole injury crisis where he's had double-digit injuries for a long, long time, and the club have said they're sympathetic to these injuries. That's why they're not sacking him. So I think it would be then unfair to then, on the precipice of him getting these players back, say, actually, we're going to give these players to another manager. I think that'd just be illogical, in my opinion. And you might as well just give him to the end of the season. I don't see a better short-term option. I'd rather give it to Ange than Mason. I don't see us getting a manager like Iraola or whatever. You could maybe get an outside-of-the-box manager from Europe to come in right now. But I just think if you're gonna stick through him within the injury crisis, you might as well give him that Europa League run and see if you can turn the form around. And then at the end of the season, if you've made that decision, it's not working, then you go your separate ways. But I think for now, you might as well stick with him.
Yeah, but if you can potentially get a manager in right now, I'm not saying you can, but let's say potentially like Pochettino would join. I know he probably won't, or Iraola would join right now. Would you not take it?
If I think
they could join right here, right now, tomorrow, if I could say to you, Pochettino or Iraola would join Spurs, would you not take it?
No, to be honest, because they also play a very high intensity system, and I think they also play in a certain way that could also cause the same problems. I think I would rather just allow Ange to see what he can do with the players he's coming back, rather than just giving it to a new manager right now, in my opinion. I think I don't see the point in changing up mid-season and going and trying to get this new manager to implement new ideas from now to the end of the season. I'd rather see if Ange can prove that he's right, that the injuries are the source of the problems, and then we'll know. And if he's right, then fantastic. If he's not right, and we continue with these results even with the players back, then we'll know for sure and we can go our separate ways. I think this season is on the precipice of being dead anyway. I don't think we'll get much joy by changing the manager. I don't think, and changing the way we play. I think the players are still, in my opinion, behind him, and I think they still want to play for him. So I think on that basis, I might as well just stick with Ange to the end of the season. I think that's the biggest upside we can have, I think.
I just want to say quickly, and I think Sean said it, and I've said it a while as well, people need to get Pochettino out of their minds. It's always the dream for him to get, he's not coming back. He may be in England right now. First of all, for him to come, Daniel Levy would need to apologise and admit he got it wrong. Not going to happen. Then he's going to need to pay a whopping, severance or package to get him out, compensation. And then thirdly, he's got the chance, not many managers in the world get, to be a manager of a host nation at a World Cup. There's just no chance. If people still think Poch, or they want Poch back, and I'm not particularly bothered whether he does or he doesn't. I loved him when he was here, but obviously it didn't end well. Is you're going to have to wait at least till after the World Cup. So it's the typical find another manager until he becomes available, because anyone thinking Pochettino is going to come in as this white knight and save the day, it's just not happening. And I know it gets in Spurs' heads, and I know the fantasy and the romantic side of it, but manage expectations. It's not happening.
What kind of manager would you like to see in then, Brian?
Well, like I said, whatever, I've said it before, I think any manager that comes, they're screwed before their contract dries. The ink on their contract dries, and we'll be here in 18 months again regardless. I said it before.
What's the point in changing managers then? There's probably no point to change managers then.
This is the state we're in.
There is a point. There is a point to change managers.
But just look at the one I've said as well, and I wanted him before Postecoglou, and I've watched so many interviews and extended like days at Brentford. I love Thomas Frank. I think he is wildly underrated. Yes, I get Iraola for the style of playing, what he's doing for Bournemouth, sorry. But I think what Thomas Frank has done at Brentford, changes within games, does everything with a better crop of players. I think Thomas Frank I think he's so wildly underrated. If we could get someone in, and it had to be, let's say, with Premier League knowledge, whether it be at former or current, I just love Thomas Frank. I love him.
Go on, Sean. There is a point.
Well, there's a point. So I think, I'm not sure if Brian, when he said, Sean and I agree on this, I personally do want Pochettino back. I agree with him that I think he's not going to come and leave America before the World Cup. They rolled out the red carpet for him. So as I said in my first answer, I think that the conundrum, at least in the way I would like to see it, I would like to see Poch back post 26. And I think that Ange has run his course. But listen, I think, like, you know, Sim makes a good argument for the Ange in just as much as Ange does, right? You know, but Ange, I think, says, you know, I don't want to make excuses or whatever. I'm not that kind of guy. But then these are the 25 reasons why it's not my fault. I think that there are plenty of options still available to him that he's not showing and not engaging with. And that's where I land, right? It's like I'm empathetic to the cause and the plight, but at the same time, to say that you don't have any options, I think you have fewer options for sure. And I also, you know, think that there's an argument to say, well, just as you're getting all these players back allegedly, then, you know, it's unfair to relieve him and give it to someone else. Either way, I've chudled that over in my head, and I've landed on the fact that I think that he's had enough rope, right? And so, but then I go, well, if I want Poch, because I don't think you can convince Iraola to come now. And for what it's worth, everybody that's like Iraola's the Don, well, I'm not sure if you've had him on your channel. If you haven't, you should. Drew Zilla, he comes on my channel quite a lot. He's a stats guy. He loves digging into the stats. Most people don't talk about Iraola before Bournemouth. And he was brilliant. Very, very, you know, below bang average when he was at places before.
Was it? I thought he'd done really well in Spain.
I think he had four seasons hanging around the relegation zone. Yeah, well, listen, I haven't looked into it. I listened to Drew's take on it, and he sounds very convincing when he says that the guy was. I mean, maybe listen, I don't know, whatever. Forget that point, right? But Iraola is for me a massive risk, regardless, right? Even if you're just basing it on the Bournemouth form. As I said before 1,000 times, right? There's a never-ending list of managers that have taken their team from the also-rans to knocking on the door of Europe. But if you are gonna, you know, hang your hat on this notion that he's the guy, you know, there's very few managers that have done that and been successful. The one name that has taken a team, impressed at the lower league, or impressed at the kind of lower end of the Premier League, got his chance at a team, and then taken that team who hasn't really been that successful, knocked on the door more times than anyone else, is Pochettino, right? And if you look at Thomas Frank, you look at Marco Silva. I go to the co-op down the road like every day, and there's 3 Fulham fans that work in there, and they all tell me that, you know, Marco Silva is more respected by non-Fulham fans than he is by Fulham fans. The Fulham fans get very frustrated with him. And so, again, another example, Thomas Frank, I share Brian's admiration for the guy, but another manager that has done very well taking a team to a sustainable level. But all of these teams, Fulham's, the Brentfords, the Brightons, the Bournemouths, like, for me, they might look at their own clubs right now and think, why would I leave them to come to Tottenham? But I maintain the same narrative that I always do, which is when those teams want to kick on to the next level, they are going to really struggle, because in order to kick on and become not just a maybe European contender, but to go to that next division of elitism, then, you know, those clubs are not set up to be able to be non-selling clubs, right? In terms of the revenue streams that they generate, the way that they become sustainable is via player trading. If you want to hang on to your best players to test whether Iraola is ready for Tottenham, to test whether Thomas Frank is ready for Tottenham, those players can't sell. Those players can't be sold. They have to find other revenue streams to be able to supplement what they already have. And until those things happen, as I say, there's no examples. Very, very few examples. Maybe Eddie Howe is a good example, but very, very few examples of managers that have actually gone to the next stage. Pochettino is the best and the most likely to have done that in most people's eyes, I would imagine. So I would like to see Poch, but how do you square the circle of the next 18 months? Well, look, I'm guilty of saying you should have given Ange until the Cups. Unfortunately, 4 weeks ago, there was a manager available who I believe probably would have been a decent fit for that 18-month, 2-year transition, because I think that with Tottenham's and Daniel Levy's movement towards youth-centric profiling of how we can remain competitive, but also not break the wage structure, also not break the bank, is by going after all these the best talent. And I think that Tottenham fans should be rightly excited about the future, because we have quietly gone about building the greatest, I think one of the greatest youth-centric models in European football, if not the Premier League at least, but certainly across Europe. There's very few teams that are putting together a better profile of players under the age of 21. To me, though, you need a manager and a coaching staff that have got a track record of getting the best out of that potential. Graham Potter is one. What he did at Brighton was fantastic. Look at Evan Ferguson's rise and then decline. You look at other players that came along like Caicedo, etc. All of that stuff can be attributed to what someone like Graham Potter does. Maybe the short-term gap is a 2-year contract to someone like Ian McKenna, who also has a track record of doing really good things with youth players. He even did it within the Tottenham ecosystem.
From Ipswich.
Sorry, Kieran McKenna. Sorry, my bad. Brain fart. Kieran McKenna.
He's a Tottenham boy as well, Kieran McKenna.
Tottenham boy as well, right? Exactly. He's a Tottenham boy as well. And I know.
But is he not guilty of like doing everything everyone accuses Ange of doing, not adapting and just playing his way or the highway? And that's cost Ipswich lots of points this season. I've seen them playing out the back, giving away goals, and he's kept playing the same way. Is that not guilty of what people accuse Ange of doing?
Right, but he has a track. The difference being, and people were chastising the Burnley manager Company, right, last season, doing exactly the same thing. They get relegated, and Company goes up to Bayern Munich, right? So to me, was it Bayern Munich or was it Leverkusen?
Yeah, Bayern.
Bayern, right. So to me, I think there's what I'm looking for is a continuation of the trend towards attractive football, but that someone that has a proven track record of developing youth in the interim period between now and the end of the 2026 World Cup season. And like I say, I think that for me, Ange Postecoglou, and forgive me for my ignorance here, I don't know what his track record was with youth development in Australia, and I don't know I know he obviously failed with the Australian youth setup back in the day, and the same earmarks of his kind of sooky nature, where he doesn't like difficult questions, is there for everyone to see on the YouTube videos of him when he was called out on the mainstream in Australian TV. But since then, I don't know whether he had a track record in Japan. I don't know, but I don't think that anyone really, when you hear the name Ange Postecoglou, you very seldom associate him with successful youth team development or youth team player or youth player, young player development, right? In terms of what he did at Celtic. I don't know if that's fair or not, but it's not a relationship that's often spouted. And so I'm looking for someone who has a track record of doing that in the interim between now and hopefully 2026 when you can get Poch in. And so for me, you could look, there's a number of managers out there that can continue the movement towards attractive football, but also can develop some of this promising talent that we have, of which we have bundles, but just need someone who can put an arm around the guys and get the best out of them.
That Ange is definitely known for bringing in younger players, 100%. That's what he was. That's what his kind of job was in his previous clubs. He'd come in, take out all the older players. I don't know about Celtic, but in his previous jobs before then, I know definitely in the Australian national team, definitely when he was in Australia and also in Japan, he would come in, get rid of all the older players, anyone who he thought was a bit older and kind of experienced players, he'd shit them off, bring in younger players and add energy to the team. That was what he was known for doing, 100%.
Okay, well, I haven't seen enough of it. I haven't seen enough of it at Tottenham Sim. I've seen players being used.
We're the top of the league this season for minutes given to teenagers.
Yeah, of course, but that's not through choice. Right? Let's just be straight up here. Jed Spence, not that he's a young player anymore, but you can almost write off the last 3 years of his career because all managers dismissed him. He's only there because of choice. Archie Gray would not be playing the minutes he's had because if it wasn't for the injuries. Same with Lucas Bergvall. Same with.
They're all starting Europa League games, Sean. They were bedding in there. These are young players at a new big club. They were bedding into the team, right? So that he gave them starts in Europa League with a view of them eventually getting starts in the Premier League. That is how you develop young players.
If that's the case, then why is he making excuses saying we have no options off the bench? We are where we are, 12 players out, but yet you take off Mikey Moore against Villa, but you leave on Decky and Sonny. Why is it?
Because Mikey Moore was getting bullied and he's a 17-year-old kid.
In my opinion, Mikey Moore was the best outfield player in that game, in that first half.
I disagree. I think he played one chance. Fair enough. Look, this is not me bashing him. I just thought he was getting bullied a bit, and I thought
who was a better player? Did Decky
was much better than him in the second half. Much better,
100%. In the first half, when the decision was made,
in the second half,
huh?
You said Decky played poorly in the first half.
I'm saying we changed it. Decky was a lot better and Spurs were a lot better in that second half. I thought it was a good change.
In the first half, when the decision was made to hoist one of them, Sonny, Decky or Mikey Moore, in the first half performance, in which before the decision was made, who was the worst of the three? It wasn't Mikey Moore.
Yes, but he was the one getting bullied the most. Yeah, 100%.
And he's the one that's got the freshest legs. And then you come out afterwards and say, The guys are
The guy
exhausted.
is a 17-year-old kid. We've got to protect him. He's getting bullied out there. Every time he got the ball, he's getting shoved off it. Yes, he got
It's him,
created
he
that one
wasn't.
chance.
He was.
I know he created that one chance, and
disagree
everyone remembers it.
completely.
And fair enough. This is not me bashing Mikey Moore at all. I think it was a good assessment from Ange, and I think actually we improved after Mikey
Sim,
Moore
I
went
just-
off. And I
wanna
thought
add
Decky
to
was a
this.
lot better.
We approved for 15 minutes.
I want to add to this about that
improved.
he brings through youngsters. He stayed at clubs 3 years maximum, and then let's just say he gets he's now waiting for his first team players to get back, which aren't the youngsters, and then we've got it's a myth with all he does to say we've got a young team is put youngsters on the bench because we haven't got enough quality to put on the bench. All these youngsters coming through, your Donnellys, your Divines that are out there, your Scarlets that are playing now, like Sean said, through choice, through necessity. Lakshia's gone out on loan. All these players that we have, if he was here next season, he's not going to all of a sudden say, Van der Ven, Romero, you're out, and you're all going to start now. He may have brought young players through, but it's I don't know how we could say he's a manager that brings through youth when he stays 3 years.
You're only talking about teenagers. The whole team is young. Doggy's 22, Van der Ven's 22, Sarr is 21. The guy has brought in a very young team.
How many of them has he made better?
I think a lot of them have been better. Obviously, the squad at the moment, if you look at it right now, obviously no one's better because of the situation we're in. But I think if you look at
how many of the players over the last 18 months?
Sarr's been better.
Has he?
Yeah,
I don't think he has. I think he's fallen off a cliff. I think his passing ability is atrocious.
So you're saying Sarr is not better than he was 18 months ago?
I think Sarr recently has been absolutely
who
shocking.
started him? Who brought him into the team?
Conte.
No, Ange.
Conte brought him
Conte
into the
barely
team.
played him. He played him one game. What are you talking about?
More than he one that gave him his debut and brought him into the team.
No. Ange started him. Conte did not trust Sarr. That's a fact. Conte started in one game.
Specifics of one player aside.
How is that controversial to say?
Hang on, specifics of one player aside of who started who.
Brennan, Decky. I think a lot of these players have got
the judgment call on whether or not Ange is a developer of youth should not be a line in the sand whether or not the whole squad is young. That's a decision made by Daniel Levy and Paratici 3 years ago to go in that direction. My argument is, has Ange Postecoglou made any of these players that have been, even the players that you're talking about that are slightly more kind of senior players but still of a young age, like Pedro Porro, like Kulusevski. I mean, Kulusevski is definitely better for sure. I think he's better, but is he better because of Ange? I don't know. I think he's a better player because of his confidence. The rest of them, I'd make the argument that most of this team have not really progressed in their development as a player by Ange Postecoglou, and that for me is the bridge, the gap that we need to fill over the next 18 months before hopefully I get my way and Poch comes back.
Sean, I don't even think Kulusevski is confidence. I think Kulusevski's got much better because he's been moved centrally. It's positionally.
Fine. Yeah,
they've moved him central, and he's got a lot more. Sorry about Ben.
That is down to Ange because he's the one that moved him
100%. Obviously, putting him in the position we wanted to see him in, and we saw it at the end of last season at Sheffield United when it was Sheffield United, a relegated team, but he is a lot more of an asset when he's central and can go where he wants, as opposed to hogging that right touchline and being very, very, very predictable. He's had a lot more impact from that position, and he has obviously been our standout player over the whole time. I mean, recently now it's Jed Spence that's coming through, and again, that's with Ange. He could have played.
That's by accident. That was in spite of Ange.
That's what I'm saying.
Complete accident.
It's a complete fluke. And if Destiny and Porro or
Archie Gray hasn't even been played. Going back to the game against Aston Villa, we were crying out after 3 minutes, after 30 seconds. It was so obvious to everyone with two brain cells between their ears that the absence of a six, and I understand that Ange's plan A, when you invert the fullbacks, I understand that you don't necessarily need a six if you're asking the fullbacks to step in and be a part of that system. But if you ask the fullbacks to go back to a traditional model where they're going to overlap and be wider, then this notion that you don't need a six is alien to a traditional model of football. A 4-3-3 without inverted fullbacks needs a six. and you have one in Archie Gray. You could have played Ben Davies. You didn't need to play Archie Gray on the left-hand side. Ben Davies is nowhere near as tired as any of the other players and has nowhere near as many minutes in his legs, and yet Ange Postecoglou didn't do it. So this notion that Ange is a developer of youth, I just don't see it. Maybe you're right, Sim. I don't know his history very, I haven't gone through the annals of history to know how great he is and what the names are of the players that become brilliant monsters under his tenure. But at Tottenham, I think it's a lot of it's by accident and by force, as Brian said, by necessity. And then the players that have really shone, they would not be playing anywhere near the minutes that they had if it wasn't for the fact of the injury crisis that has gone his way, which again I'm empathetic towards.
That's how it should be. You should be developing players correctly. When you've got two 18-year-old kids, you should be bedding them in. You shouldn't be throwing them in there. And that's what he was doing until it got to the point where he had to throw them in. And now they're probably too much.
Right.
They're probably playing too much now because they have to.
No, but he doesn't have to. He didn't have to play Archie Gray. He could have moved him into the 6. He could have played Ben Davies. Why did Ben Davies not start that game against Villa?
I don't know why he didn't start the game against Villa, but he decided to play Gray there for one reason or other. Look, Davis has also probably played too much since he's come back. There's a number of times where he was supposed to not play 90 minutes. He had to because of other injuries, and all of a sudden he had to stay on the pitch. So maybe he wanted to give him a bit of rest. Look, he's trying to rest players. That's why he rested Basuma, rested Sarr, trying to give some sort of modicum of rest at some points. But there's only so much he can do at this point. Look, he started Gray. I was a bit confused why he started Gray, to be honest, but I'm not going to hang my hat on that and say he has to go because of that kind of decision. I think at the moment, the situation he's in, it's I understand people want better, they want results, whatever the situation, but it's an almost impossible situation to manage right now.
I'm not advocating for Ange to be shipped out and moved on because of the results. I'm very, very much aware of the situation and circumstance. I'm saying that there were two rationales. I said this in my first answer. 2 reasons why I would pivot to Ange out. One is a version of players losing faith, which I think has manifested through confusion, and/or if the cups go south. And to be entirely honest, I think the Liverpool performance was abject, and the manager is responsible for that, and the players are responsible.
Sean, is there no surprise there's confusion though? Is there no surprise that there's confusion right now when we've got very young players, 18-year-old players playing with very little training because they have to keep fit and just have recovery, right? And you've got new players coming to the team. You've got young players who have not played at this kind of level so consistently. And you've got to couple this all together to create a cohesive pressing structure against very, very good opposition on every 3 days. I think for me, it's no surprise.
You have to fight. But it's not. It's about the. Listen, this is why I hark back to this idea that I think he's a very good salesman. I think that there's people in life that love to sit there and say, blame me if you want. It doesn't bother me, but protect these players, right? He says all the sound bites that make you empathetic to his plight because he's protecting young players. But in reality, the idea that I don't care what you say about me, he really does. Otherwise, he wouldn't have such a stark 180 between when he wins and the cocky, confident, funny version of him that comes out versus when he loses and he can't even give the fans who only get 15 minutes with him and to hear his thoughts once a week or twice a week. I think that he does care. And listen, there's a word in Australia. There's a word in Australia for people that act that way. It's a sook, right? And I think that he acts that way.
Me in Australia.
Yeah, I've been called it. I lived there for 3 years. They call that to me. But I just think that this notion, Sim, it's not about the result against Liverpool. It's not even about the result against Aston Villa. It's about the fight. And in the 90 minutes against Liverpool, there was none. There was absolutely none. It was so unbelievably unacceptable from a team of players that the manager is responsible for getting ready. He is known for his ability to put together a wonderful, passionate pre-match pump up, right? Almost as good as your pre-match pump ups on this channel. They're phenomenal when they work, right? But not. Against Liverpool, it wasn't. I don't care if we lose, but you have to fight. We didn't. And then the first 30 minutes against Villa, it was embarrassing. And the Ange has to take responsibility, not for the outcome, but for the input. And it wasn't good enough. And that's why I think that those are demonstrations of a confused output that you can't continue to really have that much patience for.
Yeah, and you look at how the squad has been affected by these injuries and by these players. You look at Pedro Porro, who's played I think the most minutes out of anyone in the whole across the whole of Europe, which never should be the case. You know, especially when you've had someone like Jed Spence for the whole first half of the season. You look at the point that you were talking about before. I didn't speak about it, but I think you're right in what you're saying. Kulusevski, when you're looking at last season to this season, is the only player that Ange Postecoglou has been able to improve. You look at everyone else from anyone in the back line, Destiny Udogie, Pedro Porro, moving into the midfield and the attack. Tell me one player, Sim, that he's improved. Brendan hasn't even improved that much.
He's improved.
Not really.
He's improved.
He's improved his output, but has he improved as a player?
Yeah, I think so.
No, he hasn't.
I think he has.
He hasn't.
I think he has improved as a player. I think
right.
Maddison's better than last season. I think...
Really?
Yeah. I think Sarr at points.
What?
I think Sarr's better. What? Maddison's better than he was probably since January last season. He's been better this season. Yeah, for sure. I think he's been better this season.
It's a really low bar, mate. The guy's been bang average since he came into this team.
Simeon, I have to say,
I
when
think
they
since
hand
January
out the-
last season and compared to this season, he's been better. I think so.
Yeah, so he's gone from absolutely
when they hand out the
awful
New Year's
to
honours lists for
fairly-
dedication to Ange, you are the only one that's going to get knighted. You are the way you have defended this man. You deserve some kind of medal. You deserve some kind of honour, because you are sticking to your guns, and there are a lot of people, or a majority
I think right
of people.
now it's hard for anyone to improve as well in this current situation. I think if you're looking earlier in the season, Sarr was in brilliant form, and you can definitely say because Sarr was in poor form at the end of last season,
Sim,
he
if you-
definitely improved.
If
He
you have
actually
elite
started the season
players,
poorly,
if you
Sarr.
have
There
elite
was a
players,
small period in the middle where he was good.
if we had bought leaders and people that could be highly influential, there were players on that pitch that wouldn't accept what is going on the pitch right now. If we went and brought in characters that had high standards, self-pride, dedication, and commitment to fight for that badge and run through a brick wall, this wouldn't be acceptable. But we don't buy those type of players because A, they'll want a high wage, B, they cost a lot of money, and that's where the shit stops. These players don't have the right mentality. You look at it, that semi-final that we've all spoken about, I go back in the night, if we had people like Colin Calderwood, Paul Allen, Steve Sedgley, David Howes, I could go on, Justin Edinburgh, they would do their conkers during that 90 minutes and say, we might not get the result, but you bloody well put in a performance. And these players do not have the desire to put in a performance. And that's a big issue. That is a massive, massive issue.
And also, Brian, I'm looking at like this form right over the last 2.5 months, right? And only the players that he's been forced to play, like the Spencers, like the Bergvals, like the Archie Gray, these are the guys actually that are stepping up for us on a consistent basis. The players that he actually wants to play are putting in stinkers more or less week in, week out.
Correct. Absolutely bang on.
So
I promised him last night on text that I'd be his ally today, and I'd help him out.
3-on-1,
But you know what?
Sean. 3-on-1. I'm disappointed in you.
you've done Sim the dirty, Shawnee. You've done Sim
Thrown
the
him
dirty.
right under the bus.
This is the worst betrayal I've ever seen.
Sim's only trying to get guests so they're going
He's
to be
like
your
a
ally. He's
Trojan
like,
horse.
finally, someone come with me in the Ange out camp. Someone, anyone. Josh King has deserted him. Now you've deserted him. There's no one left.
Well,